As we're looking at the 2026 rookie class, there is a clear QB1, Fernando Mendoza, a clear RB1, Jeremiah Love, and a clear tight end one, Kenyon Sadiq. But is there a clear wide receiver one? Is there even a clear top wide receiver tier? Jeff Bell from Football Guys is joining me today to talk about that and what dynasty managers should do with the draft picks they have in the first round and beyond, next on Dynasty Compass. Welcome to Dynasty Compass. I am your host, Jeff Blaylock, the other Jeff B from Football Guys, and I am thrilled to have today the reason why I am the other Jeff B. This is Jeff Bell in the other box. For those of you listening, I guess today, he is the original Jeff B at Football Guys, and so now both of us are together. Jeff Bell, thanks so much for joining, and welcome to Dynasty Compass.
You know, Jeff Hive, we are one. We are all in. There is no other Jeffs. We're all part of the Hive. So it's great to be able to record here with you and thrilled that you reached out, and definitely happy to jump on and start to talk about this 2026 rookie class.
Yeah, the Football Guys rookie guide just came out a few days ago. That was a lot of work. It's very clear that you guys worked very hard into that. So, you know, what goes into creating something like that, and how much of your life has it consumed since the beginning of the year?
You know, I would say the entirety, but at the same time, we're stepping into, I'm a CPA and we're starting to get pretty busy at work. So like, it wasn't even it was a lot though. And it's really interesting. This is at least my fourth year, if not my fifth year, but I think it's my fourth year. It's one of those doing this. And really just kind of the way that we've built it over the years has really changed dramatically in terms of when we first started doing it, we were building it in Canva. And so like a lot of the like moving things around and like doing all the player blurbs and pulling all the information. And it was a lot more of a manual process on that. And now it's a lot more streamlined, and we create player cards on Basecamp. We just do our write up. And so my job has gotten a lot easier because our amazing graphics, we're able to pull it together, and we're really thrilled with the product this year. But as part of that, my responsibility is shifted of like, now I'm responsible for the player pool that we're like the entire player pool that we're actually writing up. And I've joked with my friend Matt Waldman before about how his editors have like asked him of like you just go off the list. Like, why don't you go? And like, there's no list. There's no list at all. And so you really end up feeling like almost like an NFL area scout, or like you're just trying to build the list. And so like that's one of my biggest stress points now of like, I do the wide receivers. And so we have 57 wide receivers in the guide this year. But also just viewing the whole player pool and balancing that against, there's only so much time in the world, and people probably don't need to read 212 profiles if we even had the availability to do it. When you break down, it ends up being like 12 quarterbacks get drafted, and like about 32 wide receivers and about 23 running backs. But you're starting from before even we have the NFL Combine process. And so it's just a blank slate of where you're going to go with it. And so I think that's one of the biggest consuming things, is just the stressing out about missing a guy.
Well, I mean, clearly you struggled with this because you only found 157 guys to profile this year. So
I cut like 75. I cut like 25 guys down like in the last week. There was some messages behind the scenes of like, hey, where are we going with this? And so there was about 30 players that got the axe at the end.
Yeah, so while you guys have been working on that, I've been working on dynasty projections, and I look at some of these names and I go, who are these guys? So we've talked about how you come up with names out of nowhere because there is no list. But what is your process for evaluating rookies once you've given yourself the name that you're going to chase today? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so this is my fourth year doing wide receivers and being able to just go really deep into wide receivers. And one of the things that I always really value and keep in mind, Bucky Brooks is somebody that I really appreciate. And Bucky talks a lot about the scouting process, and we talks about wide receivers. He always talks about building a basketball team. And so like you're looking for players that have complementary skill sets. And so I'm looking for players with complementary skill sets, but how do I project them into actual NFL roles? And so that's where you're looking for a guy that can kind of, if you like put it in your mind of like have the guy that can win vertically or the guy that can win in the short and intermediate areas. And then you get like the all-star scorer that can just do everything, is like the Malik Neighbors type of a player. It doesn't really matter. And so when the process is, I'm always trying to keep in mind of what can the player do? What can he do, as opposed to like, what can't he do? What's the negatives in his game? What can he do that provides a potential path to an NFL roster? Once he makes an NFL roster, what can he do? I view it in tiers of like, there's making the roster, and then there's getting onto the field, and then there's actually being in a position to get the ball and to be able. And so like trying to identify what a player can do, how can he build that path out, and what does that path look like for the player? What skill sets do they offer?
So when you're doing these evaluations and you're looking at those kinds of traits, and perhaps you're also looking at video or film, so us older guys call it film, of the guys who you're scouting. What out of all of that just screams to you that this guy has it? He has got what it's going to take to see the field, to get the ball, to potentially become, a top tier starter, or at least have a really long, productive career in starting lineups for dynasty managers for years to come.
Yeah, so I realize I'm infamous about not actually answering the question, and so you talk about process of evaluating players. So I watch everything I can find. Is basically the way I say it. And so Caddy's cut-ups is one that I really like for all 22, but I watch everything that I can find. You get into this like a Tyron Montgomery, like I'm watching like huddles and like anything that I can find to be able to watch players. And so my process is basically scouring the webs and everything possible to be able to find anything that I can see players, is where a lot of my process ends up landing on. But now when I'm doing that, what screams that he has it, I think it's the ability to, and really just probably in anything in life that you're looking for, but somebody that can solve problems. And I think that if you're thinking about somebody that can solve problems, of like, it doesn't matter like if you're hiring an accountant or if you're hiring somebody in crisis management, if they can solve problems, that they bring that skill set. And so when I'm looking for a guy that has it, the ability to solve problems, the ability to, everybody in that game plan knows exactly what this guy is going to do, and he still just does it. And so just seeing that and seeing like players, like one of the things, especially with wide receivers, but the ability to erase angles is, I think, is so fascinating. It's just an interesting concept. And I vividly remember Ted Ginn. So Ted Ginn, his very first time he touched the ball at Ohio State was on a punt return, and it was against Michigan State. And he took it to the house, and it was like guys were like, you could just tell, like, this guy knows this angle because he's done this hundreds of times in high school. And by the time he gets to the spot he thinks he needs to be at, Ted Ginn is 15 yards downfield. And so like seeing like that ability of like basically to just put players that they've repped it out, they know what they're supposed to do, and you still put them in bad positions, or the defense might throw something at you that is specifically designed to stop this, but you still solve that problem. And I think that just in general, and you look at high-level athletes have more ways to solve a problem. Like Josh Allen can solve a lot of problems, where Josh Allen can use his physicality, keep plays alive, he uses pass strength, and whereas Bryce Young, his problem solving might be a little bit more limited on what those tight windows or some of those things that Bryce Young's able to do. And so I think that looking for the ability to solve the most problems possible.
Yeah. I know you didn't want to highlight really negatives, that this is really more of a pursuit of positives, but there, at least with the top talents, there has to be some red flags that you also see that say, this one, let's pump the brakes on the hype train for this guy just a little bit. What would some of those be that you see?
Probably, especially at wide receiver, Dante Thornton probably doesn't deserve this, but I've started calling it Dante Thornton package, basically, of like when you see a guy that so like Dante Thornton, when I watched the Tennessee film, it was like the stats were cool because he would have like a lot of explosive touchdowns, but literally everything was just run a straight line down the field fast or catch a wide receiver screen, and some poor UAB defensive back would break a tackle and Dante Thornton would run 75 yards for a touchdown. And so just like very, very limited on what a player is offering. And really kind of when you're looking at it holistically, when you're looking at, again, like the basketball team. So if you're looking at the concept of a basketball team, like there's some players that their job is to have the ball and put the ball in the basket. And there are other players whose job is to allow the player to put the ball in the basket. There's a guy that is a screener, or there's a guy that is going to stand in the corner, and sure, he can shoot threes, but he's only going to stand in the corner, or like players that very, very limited when you're looking at how you would scheme out an offense. And again, the antithesis of like talking about a player that can solve a lot of problems, of really just offering, it very clearly looks like they're going to be a supporting player. Like they can definitely be on the field. And we, in dynasty space, it's the roster cloggers, where it's those guys that we know, the high snap guys that don't necessarily turn into the high high usage guys. And so just kind of those guys that maybe look a little bit more like window dressing.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a future being some teams wide receiver 3, but that's not really an asset from a dynasty standpoint to have somebody stand out there and run 45 routes and be thrown to once.
Exactly. It's a lot of good blockers and a lot of guys that can run fast down a straight line, and maybe they'll be forgotten about occasionally, but for the most part, they're not going to be schemed into what's going on.
Yep. So as we're looking kind of at this draft class overall, and I've been hearing and thought this myself, that this class as a whole is maybe not as strong as others that we've seen, maybe not as strong as the one that's coming up. But there does seem to be some depth at the wide receiver position, and maybe it's a little bit stronger there. So how would you rank this 2026 rookie wide receiver class against some of the recent ones we've had, and potentially the one that's coming next year in 2027?
Yeah, I think it's so we're looking at just specifically receivers. I tend to think the class is maybe a little bit better than it's given credit. I don't know that we have. I think that when you talk about a weak class, you can be talking about a couple different things. But I think when you say it's a weak class, really it's a weak class because there's no Jamar Chase, there's no Jeremiah Smith. And I mean, having Jeremiah Smith makes it even more glaring. And to me, a lot of this class just maybe holistically reminds me a lot of 2022. And it's not quite there of like, we actually have a quarterback. We didn't have a quarterback in 22, but like Breece Hall, we knew Breece Hall was pretty good, but also Bijan's coming next year. And so it's like one of those things, or like the receivers are pretty solid, but at the same time, Jamar Chase was just last year, and now you're just telling me we just have Garrett Wilson. So it's like one of those things of like the context that as you're looking around it, but really to break it down and dig into it. I mean, we feel pretty comfortable that a quarterback's going to go one in the class. Yep. There's a running back that we feel has a chance to go top 10 in the class, which is relatively rare. There's 3 wide receivers I think we feel like should be off the board in the first half of the draft. And I mean, the 2023 draft with the Jackson Smith and Jigba class, no wide receivers went off the board until late in the teens. And so I think that a lot of the talk about it being a weak class is like everybody's just ready for this 27 class. And so, I mean, that's part of the context on it, but I think it's a little bit better than maybe given credit, but the 2022 kind of sticks in my mind where we're like, you get Garrett Wilson, you get Chris Olave, you get Breece Hall. Like there's probably guys in this class, but I understand that you had Jamar Chase the year before, and the year after you had Bijan. So,
yeah, when you're looking, and you've already kind of identified, you've got Mendoza, who's likely the 101, unless something really uncanny happens. You mentioned, without naming him, Jeremiah Love, who I believe is that running back that is top 10 worthy. You've got some wide receivers. If you're thinking about a 12-team dynasty league, and you're thinking about what that first round looks like, in many years we see kind of 5 to 6 to 8 players kind of clustered toward the top, and then there's a drop off at that point. where do you see that drop off in this year's class? Is it after Jeremiah Love at 2? Is it down among this first group of receivers? Does it include Sadiq? I mean, where do you kind of put that cliff where there's a drop off in talent that's very noticeable between the early picks and the later picks?
I think you're feeling pretty good if you have one of the first 2 picks in the draft. I think you're feeling okay if you have the first 5 picks in the draft, of like basically 3 to 5. And then probably 6 to 8, you're probably hoping you see something that makes you feel better about having the number 6 pick, is probably where we're landing right now as you really kind of slice it all up. I think that you're going to see, I think you could have Jeremiah Love or Fernando Mendoza as the 101, and the other guy obviously being the 102. And then you probably put the 3 wide receivers with Makai Lemon, Carnell, Tate, and Jordan Tyson in some order next to that. Then you're probably looking at, in my mind, you're looking at Sadiq at the tight end. You're looking at Casey Concepcion. You're looking at Denzel Boston. You're looking at hoping that couple of the running backs. I think there's some interesting running backs, about 6 or 7 interesting running backs behind Love, that you're hoping they land in the spots where you feel pretty good about them. And so that's where you get to about 8 or 9 players and separating around 2, around 5, and then probably that 8 or 9. So,
okay. How many wide receivers do you see going in the first round of typical dynasty drafts this year?
I want to say 5, but I feel like 6, because I feel like there's going to be, like, somebody's going to work their way in there when it comes down to it. And really, again, as we're breaking it down, I feel really good about 5 here. We know where there's a quarterback. We know there's at least 1 running back. So we're at 7 now at this point. So you're looking at 5 other spots. There's Sadiq, if he's in there too. So then you're looking at 4 other spots. And then kind of you're counting on some of the running backs to working out. You're not, unless like we see something pop with Ty Simpson in, or if Chambliss or somebody ends up being that second quarterback in Superflex. I have a feeling there will be a wide receiver that it makes it 6.
What would be your advice to somebody who's got that pick immediately below that cutoff point? So pick 103, 106, 109, 110, any of those particular places where you've got some kind of measurable drop off. And what's your advice to that person? And you may be talking to somebody who's got 1 or more of those picks who's dying to know what you would do with them.
So one of my favorite dynasty minds is Leo Pasiga. I think is really one of my favorite dynasty minds. And Leo is always talking about playing who's in your leagues. And if you're below those tiers, it really, I think timing is big on how much does it cost to move up to those tiers. Like how plugged in are your league mates? Are you able to do the little incremental move that gets you into that tier, especially early in the game? But as you get closer to the draft, I think you get some pretty rigid consensus locked in on what those actual tiers are. Mm-hmm. I think that basically, if you're able to play it, you know your league, and you're able to give up minimal amounts to be able to step into those tiers, absolutely do it. I think it's worth doing it. I tend to think that we get way, way too warped onto consensus mind on where those tiers actually land, and it ends up being probably beneficial to move out of those tiers at some level when people are ready to give. They're sitting there with the 106 and they're just desperate to get one of those 3 wide receivers, and they'll give you a future first. And probably at that level, it might be worth just taking Casey Concepcion and a future first then, as opposed to, being absolutely convinced that it's going to be Jordan Tyson is the dude. And so I think that kind of that's where I view that on, is it you're early enough in the game where the incremental movement isn't really going to affect too much, or is it later in the game where you are locked in on, no, these are the 8 players in the draft and everybody else is trash?
Well, let's hope it's not quite that bad, but it may be this year. So we've already talked a little bit about the consensus RB1, QB1, and tight end 1 in that being Love, Mendoza, and Sadiq respectively. But there doesn't seem to be as much consensus on what the wide receiver 1 is, but there do seem to be 3 or so that have kind of separated themselves a little bit early on in this process. Do any of, Makai Lemon, Carnell, Tate, Jordan Tyson, I believe those are your top three, although that may not be the right order that you have them in.
That's the right order. So
wonderful. Do any one of them kind of stand out above the others, or are they more kind of an interchangeable group of three people that, if you had, say, the 5th overall pick, you're content with whichever one of those three falls to you, and that's that?
I'm definitely content at this point in time if I've got the lower pick, especially if I'm able to move something to have the lower pick. I do have Lemon first just because I think his game, he doesn't really have the injury concerns that Jordan Tyson has kind of looked at, and then I think his game profile is a little bit more, as I'm thinking in my mind, of like half PPR or PPR scoring, plays in a little bit more, I think, maybe than Tate's does, and so that's where this differentiating factor. That said, I think that the only opinion that I think that I'm absolutely convinced is wrong is being steadfast that one of these guys is the clear number one, because I think landing spot is really going to matter on deciding where this breaks down. I mean, one of these guys ends up as attached to like Jaden Daniels or something like that, and you feel great about that, versus another guy's playing with Kenny Pickett. I mean, it's I think it's silly to like really plant a flag and then like not move because you've decided that this guy is your wide receiver one, and it doesn't matter if he's playing with the ghost of whoever. I don't know. Like,
yeah, I mean, I would imagine that someone like Mendoza is still going to be the QB1, even if for some reason he winds up in the Jets instead of with the Raiders. I don't think that there's any reason anybody else would vault ahead of him in the order. But it sounds like with these three, their pole positions could change quite a bit. Now, I believe you've got Kissy Concepcion next, and you've already mentioned him once. And how, as of this moment, what's the delta, what's the gap between him and those top three guys that you just mentioned?
I mean, I already kind of said with the tiers that I don't know that it's not quite as wide as we've decided, like consensusly. And again, that's kind of, I do feel like we see these players sometimes that we decide there's a massive gap, and then the draft actually comes and Jordan Tyson's the 4th receiver off the board, and then you're like, well, what do you do with this now? Like, so I think that's I think that him and Boston are definitely going to be in the conversation there in the mid to late first round, and I think the other three are going to be kind of more the mid to early first round conversation. So again, you're still getting a first round wide receiver out of this, I do believe. And so overall, it doesn't really hold up quite as well as it did last year. But like, I know last offseason I was thinking a lot about like Rome Odunze and Brian Thomas Jr. and about how, like, you probably didn't feel too bad about if you ended up with Brian Thomas Jr. instead of Rome Odunze. People might feel a little bit different now, but I think overall, you tend to see that. And another, right before when I got your questions and I was going through, I was looking at old ADPs, and I thought it was really interesting on like a guy like Zay Flowers was like way behind like Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and like now, like you maybe you're not feeling too bad about having Zay Flowers instead of maybe Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnston. So
yeah, I mean, it's that part of that, of course, is just landing spot, and part of that is all sorts of other intangibles that happen. I mean, landing spot does play kind of an outsized role in terms of success, at least immediate success for some of these players. Just as, draft capital in the NFL really helps to dictate who's going to get the first playing opportunity. So of these five guys that we've talked about, Lemon, Tate, Tyson, Concepcion, Boston, where would you put them in terms of, you could just wave a magic wand over them and put them in the best possible spot? What does that look like, and what does their role in that spot look like?
Can I just say Buffalo for all of them because they need a wide
Yes.
receiver and you get Josh Allen?
Yes, for those who are not watching on video, he has both Buffalo Bills posters behind him today. So very much a big Buffalo Bills fan. Yes, the Bills need any or all of these guys. Their wide receiver room is something to behold.
Yeah, I think it's. Man, this is a good question. So where are we going to pick? I actually should just look at the Football Guys rookie guide because I did landing spots for them, and where I thought, let's do that. Let's go to the Football Guys rookie guide, where I thought would be good landing spots for these players when I actually scouted them. So Makai Lemon, the landing spots that stood out to me, I had Pittsburgh Steelers, New Orleans Saints, and Cleveland Browns. And so I think that especially when you're looking at the Steelers and the Saints, those we know DK Metcalf and Chris Olave, the ability for those players to be vertical down the field players, kind of. I view a lot of the way I view it basically is thinking about like high-low concepts of like you're as an NFL quarterback, you don't have time to stand back there and scan the whole field and be this Drew Bledsoe field general that is just like standing 6'7" in the pocket and looking all around. So it really ends up being you're playing half the field, and in that half the field, you're looking at a high-low. Who's going to be the high guy? Who's going to be the low guy? And so that's where I think having like a DK Metcalf or Chris Olave potentially over the top with Makai Lemon would be a very, very fun spot there. And then the Browns kind of coming in as just desperately needing that lead receiver. There might be some overlap, maybe you might think, with Fannin there, Harold Fannin Jr. at tight end, but I think Lemon can win vertically up the slot and play kind of inverse, be that guy that can stretch the field there. Carnell, Tate. So I had the Washington Commanders, the New York Jets, and the Los Angeles Rams for Carnell, Tate. And really kind of when I'm looking at these landing spots, I'm kind of feeling like where they're going to land in the draft, what teams are in those areas. And so I'm seeing Tate kind of more as the back end of the top 10 or so, or like early into, and that's where we know the Rams have that Falcons pick right there. Right. The Jets have an extra pick. So kind of the need, I think, overall for Commanders to have a young developmental wide receiver opposite Terry McLaurin. I think maybe shades of Brian Thomas Jr. playing with Jaden Daniels at LSU if you were to put Carnell Tate there in that offense. The Jets they love their Ohio State players and being able to play opposite Garrett Wilson, and you can kind of invert those roles for how that works best there. And then the Rams to kind of project him into that Devontae Adams long-term player that is able to line up, win at different levels. So Jordan Dyson, I've got Cleveland Browns, Tennessee Titans, New Orleans Saints again, just teams that I see massive needs picking in the top 10-ish for wide receiver. Casey Concepcion. I had the Buffalo Bills, again, Cleveland Browns. They really need a wide receiver, those Cleveland Browns. And then the San Francisco 49ers for Concepcion, a team that we felt really good about the receiver depth at the 49ers like 3 years ago, and now we definitely do not. And then for Denzel Boston, I had the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Seattle Seahawks. And so kind of, local flair there potentially for Boston with Seattle, but also a big receiver opposite Jackson Smith and Jigba. Baltimore, I think, could definitely use a big receiver like Boston opposite Zay Flowers. And then I think Buffalo could use like literally any type of wide receiver at this point.
Yes. I believe that would definitely help Josh Allen out if he had anybody he could throw to reliably that wasn't named Khalil Shakir. When I looked at your personal big board a couple of days ago, you had a bunch of wide receivers just kind of clustered together at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, if we were looking at it from a dynasty 12-team draft standpoint. So how about those guys, and which ones are really exciting and which ones are, talents there, but there's not that, maybe just not that exciting of an option for someone picking in that area of the draft?
Yeah, and really the way that I end up doing my ranks is I do a lot of grouping with my ranks and kind of have a cluster of wide receivers, a cluster of running backs, and kind of wait to see, do players separate out of this because of landing spot or because where they draft capital, like what the league tells you about a player does belong outside of this tier. But otherwise, at this early part of the process, kind of a lot of clustering in the way that I will group out the positions. Player that, I really love Reggie Virgil, and there's not a lot of conversation about Reggie Virgil right now, but to me, I think he's a very, very smooth player that can bring a lot of different things. And so I think he's really, really interesting. I've got him ranked pretty high because I think the league is going to value him. I have no idea what we have with Zachariah Branch in terms of can he actually play wide receiver? Or is he like just a straight up guy? I mean, Kevontae Turpin is I know you're a TCU guy, and Kevontae Turpin is my comparison for Zachariah Branch. And I know you remember the Josh Doxson, Trevon Boykin, TCU teams with Turpin and true freshman Turpin, just this explosive dynamite player. And then he has winds and twists and turns throughout his life, but got it together there. So, and I know you're a Cowboys fan too, so you know Kevontae Turpin very, very well.
I know him very well, and I will say, as I was scanning through the guide a few days ago and saw that comparison for Zachariah Branch, that comp, I'm like, oh, so gadget guy, really fast, dynamic with the ball in his hands, but you know too, though, like Turpin was a vertical guy. Like he was, like there was some things there that he just didn't, because of how long it took him to really get in the league. Like basically the developmental aspect of where he was as a true freshman versus kind of there of like, I mean, that ceiling was as high as anybody as a true freshman. Yeah. Yeah, but he just struck me as that's not the sort of archetypal wide receiver that someone might be looking for. So with Branch, the suggestion, at least for me, was that this is more of a home run hitter kind of a guy, but he's also capable of giving you a nice solid 0 week in and week out.
There's that, but there's also, if you were to have 21-year-old Kevontae Turpin and an NFL team takes him at the end of the first round, it's going to be kind of that Xavier Worthy, like, let's see if we can figure something out here with this guy. And I think that's kind of what you're looking at with Branch.
Anyone else in that tier you want to highlight, or even the tier right below that?
Yeah, I think it's so difficult. It was so difficult for me like as I'm going through and writing up guys, it's again, like that grouping, it's pretty easy for me to like dump guys into buckets and feel, but then like when you've got 9 guys sitting in the bucket, like to pick the next one out can be pretty difficult there. But I think that the other Texas Tech guy, Caleb Douglas, I think is pretty interesting. I think I was probably a little bit too harsh on Omar Cooper Jr. on where I initially ranked him, but I think that he's worth mentioning. Probably have a little bit more reservation than some might with Chris Bell, where, obviously the injury, but also kind of was the secondary receiver up until he ended up being the senior, and kind of that's some concern there. I mean, I think Chris Brazzell is like, he's another boom bust type of a guy. And I know I've got him as my wide receiver 6. And really that breaks down on, as I'm looking at that bucket of players, who do I feel like has the best chance to go in the first round? Like kind of who's got that tantalizing skill set of athleticism, the ability to be an outside receiver that teams are looking for. That was the guy but I think that's a really, really boomer bust potential pick.
The outside receiver is an interesting point because as we've watched the NFL evolving into multiple tight end sets, it seems like the outside guys still have lots of opportunity to eat, but the slot receivers are being squeezed out because why would you want to throw it to a 5'9", 175-pound guy when you've got a 6'4", 230-pound tight end with good hands that you could throw it to instead? So does that kind of a evolving role sort of situation, is that going to trap any of these, top 10, 12, 15 or so wide receivers and potentially push them into, they've got to have the perfect system because the role that they play is slowly disappearing from the NFL? Or at least I think being lessened. The
guy that I'm seeing consensusly sitting as a top 10 receiver that I have the biggest concerns about that is Antonio Williams, the Clemson wide receiver. Mm-hmm. I think that as I'm looking at like just where the league is heading, that he seems to fit that mold of a guy that's disappearing a little bit there. Yeah. I do really like that point. It's something that I'm seeing in the league, and I think that it's something that I valued heavily as I was going through evaluating these players and looking and ranking them out of those players that I definitely knocked players if I felt like they were more of a limited inside player, just because I just don't know. I know like Caden Wetjen from Iowa. Like a lot of people loved him at this Shrine Bowl, and he was really interesting. And my comparison to him was Wes Welker. And I think that if you were to put Caden Wetjen in the absolute opposite of where he being in Iowa, if you're like a Texas Tech, like I think I could see him catching 120 balls in that like Mike Leach air raid offense. But it's like, does the NFL want that guy anymore? Or like, is that really going to be, is that role there, as opposed to wanting those versatile multiple tight end fronts and the ability to have the receivers that can play outside, that you're not losing too much by you're not really tipping your hand just into a very, very specific type of skill set.
Yeah, I think there's a really good lesson in that for dynasty managers, which is to really look, and you mentioned it almost right off the bat on the show, is what role is this guy going to be able to play in the NFL before we even look at what team he might land on. I mean, what is the sort of ideal use of this person's skill set? And if the more you get it into a narrower box of opportunity, the less valuable I think that person could be. That's not to say that, Antonio Williams won't be the wide receiver one when we redraft this 5 years from now or 3 years from now, and we go back and redraft the rookie class. He could very well end up there, but he could also end up nowhere in 3 years because the early plays may not be there anymore.
And I think it's really interesting because it's really, really difficult to find athletic tight ends that can be like those slot receivers, because we know at the NFL level, you've got like basically a 10-year window to find these guys, and it feels like only half the league can actually find those guys. Right. And so the idea that college programs can actually find those guys. And so I think it's a really interesting conversation to see as this evolves, because in the college game, there's still an awful lot of production for like that slot receiver. And Xavier Strepo from Miami last year is a great example of that, of just a lot of production with Cam Ward. And so as we are playing Dynasty, there's different ways to approach it. There's always the argument about are you a film guy or are you a numbers guy? And it's like, I'd take all the inputs and I value everything, but like, I think that you could definitely see a potential case where the production things that tell you this guy's a really productive receiver might point into that archetype that doesn't exactly get valued by the NFL. And we see it every year where like last year, I vividly remember a guys like Isaac Tisla going day 2 or Chimere Dike, where it's like he's a twitched up guy that tested very, very well but didn't have really the production profile. And I'd see the numbers guy get very, very upset because my spreadsheet tells me that he sucks. And like, why are these dumb NFL teams? What are they doing again? But the reality of it is they're looking for the elite outcome, the highest percentage outcome. And it's a lot like, if you're not taking that super, super twitched up guy, then you're already dealing with not the highest percentage possible outcome. Like it's a lot easier to grab the 4.3 guy that is that looks like it can do all the things, and then hope that he learns up with a wide receiver, as opposed to make a 4.7 guy into a 4.3 guy.
I see. It's a lot easier to teach technique than it is speed. So there at some point there's a natural
Teams
balance
love
there.
Speed. So.
Lots of speed, lots and lots of speed. So I mentioned this idea of redrafting this class several years from now. Is there, aside from your top guys, is there somebody kind of in that middle of the pack who you think could end up being the guy we say, okay, that was actually the wide receiver one from this class?
My crazy take is Tyron Montgomery. I absolutely love him. He's my favorite story in the draft by far. I don't know. Are you familiar with the story of Tyron Montgomery, or I can share it with your viewers?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Tyron Montgomery, he walked on to LSU's basketball team in like 2020. like COVID. And so if you follow college sports, like walking onto a basketball team is walking onto a high level SEC basketball team is a whole lot different than walking onto a football team where there's like 13 guys on the basketball team. So like that tells you something of like the type of athlete, the type of ability that he has. His mother ended up getting sick and he had to leave school. She ended up passing away, taking care of his younger brother, who now is a college quarterback at, I want to say it's a school in Kentucky. I don't know for sure off the top of my head where it is. So basically goes home, like has to leave the LSU basketball team he walked on, goes home, takes care of his brother. His brother's a quarterback. They're in the backyard. They're just throwing the ball around. And Montgomery, like any freak basketball player would be, is just playing the ball in the air and like all these things. And his brother's like, you really could play wide receiver. Like, you should definitely try this. And so he was like, sure, I'll try to do that. But he never had played wide receiver. So like trying to go to a D1 college when you literally never played a position, like there's nothing that you can show coaches. And so he's making all his own videos and doing all these crazy things. And it's so cool because like the videos are out there on X of these things that he made, of like him just like jumping over a 55-inch bar, like clearing it like on a leap, like, and just like wild athletic feats. And so he goes and he starts playing flag football so that he can get some tape. And he ends up in this big tournament in Las Vegas, ends up making the Olympic flag football team. And so, but he couldn't go to the Olympics. Like this is dude, like never played wide receiver before, makes the Olympic flag football team basically in like a couple tournaments. And then he couldn't play in the Olympics because he would lose his college eligibility, gets a shot at Nicholls State, plays 1 year there, first year playing wide receiver, exhausts his eligibility at the Division I level, but he was still able to play Division III. He looks and he goes around, he picks John Carroll because John Carroll, if you know anything about John Carroll or the lineage, so Nick Casario, GM for the Texans, went to John Carroll. Tom Telesco, GM for the Chargers, went to John Carroll. Josh McDaniels, offensive coordinator for the Patriots, went to John Carroll. Chris Shula, who was a coordinator for the Dolphins, went to John Carroll. So basically Montgomery said there's a deep NFL network here. I'm going to go to John Carroll. And then when he gets there, it is like literally just making these D3 guys look like children. Like, just like, and you talk about like what you want to see, like that's what you want to see. Like when it's especially when it's a D3 guy, it just makes these guys look like kids and just beast them. And then he goes to the American Bowl. And so one of the things that we talk about process and one of the things that I've learned, that I've realized about the process is kind of pay attention to the NFL telling you guys that they think are good. And so the way that the college all-star game process kind of works, there's a college gridiron showcase is a game. There's the Hula Bowl. There's the American Bowl is new. And these games are set up before the games that we all know with the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl, because they basically end up being tryouts for guys that fill the end of the roster for the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl. And if you're to look back, like it said, Tamari Dike or like Jalen Coker is a guy that really lit it up and earned another opportunity. Montgomery goes out, just lights up the American Bowl, earns a spot in the Senior Bowl, and then day one Senior Bowl practice coming out there, and he's going up against, I think it was Caleb Hood is his name from, I think he was like a consensus number 4 corner in this draft right now. And first rep, just mosses the dude. Like this is like, I want to say it's Caleb Hood. I might be wrong on the name there, but I'm thinking a guy he's pretty sure he went to Texas A&M. And so you're talking about like top 5 corner in the class, played SEC and everything. And this just dude comes out of nowhere, just mosses him and just lights up every single Senior Bowl practice. Everybody's buzzing about Tyron Montgomery at the Senior Bowl. And I think it's really interesting. It's just a lot of things that I look for in a prospect, and having that multi-sport background, I think it's so interesting and important to have that and to develop different skill sets. And Stevie Johnson's a guy that used to give Darrelle Revis fits, and Stevie Johnson his background was basketball. And so basically he would just do basketball moves on Darrelle Revis. And Darrelle Revis, we know, obviously a Hall of Fame corner and like high technical ability, but then you get the guy that is just like what's this guy doing? Like he's not doing what any other receivers are doing. And so I just think it's just a fascinating story, fascinating human interest story, and just such a complete unknown mystery box.
Yeah, that sounds like a terrific dart throw pick for dynasty managers to make if you get to that point in the draft and don't know exactly where you want to go. To have somebody you can at least root for, if nothing else, is valuable. I mean, I've said it before, say it again, that one of the keys to dynasty is to get round 1 talent with your round 3 rookie picks. We've talked about some of these guys already, so you can just bring them back up or name a different one. But who would be kind of your favorite day 2, day 3 NFL draft guys who, are looking at being in that third dynasty round that are worth the shot because they could turn into exactly that kind of, I wouldn't say Puka Nacua kind of talent, but that's where he came from in dynasty drafts. So someone kind of in that range of the dynasty draft who could be somebody's wide receiver 1 at some point.
Yeah, and a name that I'm not seeing at all, Reggie Virgil, I think definitely has the potential to be able to be there. I think that Caleb Douglas is another, both Texas Tech wide receivers, another guy that I think has an opportunity to end up there. I mean, Kevin Coleman Jr. was a big riser during the Senior Bowl. He might have moved up out of that range, but I think he's a real interesting one to take a look at. Baron Brown was a highly thought of Devy player that just like the production didn't quite get there. Kentucky's offense was basically offensive for a lot of his career, and so they weren't trying to score points, and that's the type of athlete that you're looking for. I think that as you're supposed to make that bet, I think that so I mentioned Baron Brown, Aaron Anderson from LSU, and also Chris Helton from LSU. There are 3 different LSU wide receivers in this class that they are high-level athletes. The production wasn't quite there, but I definitely feel like at least one of them is going to figure it out, because if you're giving me 3 chances here on receiver hitting, LSU is a pretty good place to make that bet there. So I think that those are 3 interesting names.
Yeah, I think those are all really good names and good people to keep out for dynasty managers to keep in mind. Jeff, thanks so much for being here. Before you go, it's another chance to talk about the Rookie Guide, your show that you do with Dave Kluge, and anything else you want the folks at home to know about you.
I mean, if you know about the show with Dave and the Rookie Guide, I feel like I really just I prefer to use that time to like highlight you, Jeff, and just say thank you so much for but like I'm serious, man, because it means a lot to have me on to be able to talk about these things and to be able to what you're doing, and really you're kind of year 1 in the space, and what you're doing in your first year is phenomenal for to do that. And I know you've always been there for me of somebody that like going above and beyond, and you've helped out with like leagues and different things and around. And so I think that's exactly what, as you're trying to carve out your area in the space and is being supportive in that regard. How can I help and all that? And just really you're participating in roundtables or whatever it might need to be, or like, I'll pick up this article here. You and Josh really crushed you. I need some help. And you guys picked up the Dynasty Waivers of the Future article and absolutely crushed that. And so I think that's awesome. And so thank you, man. Like, people see me enough. Like, they don't need to worry about me anymore. But I appreciate you doing what you do.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that, and I love doing that Dynasty Waivers of the Future piece with Josh every week. So you're trying to look several weeks ahead at who no one knows about now, but it's going to be the waiver wire darling. You read a waiver wire article, you're like, well, those guys have been gone since the draft, or those guys have been gone for 3 years. So who is that? Who are the guys I can look for if I need somebody? So that was really fun, and I really appreciate you giving me that opportunity. And thanks for being here today, for sharing your scouting and wisdom on the wide receivers. Sure, we will have more to talk about that as we get closer to the NFL draft and then head into training camps this summer. So, Jeff Bell, thanks so much for joining me, and thank you all for watching on YouTube or listening on Apple, Spotify, or whatever your preferred podcast provider is. Please like, please subscribe. If you're listening on Apple and like what you're hearing, please write a review. That'd be one of the best things that could help us grow the show right now, is to get some positive reviews and 5-star ratings over there. And check out our website, dynastycompass.com. You can find both of the Jeff B's on the Twitter/X. I'm at Jeff Blaylock. Jeff, you are at?
For whom J Bell tolls, the number 4, whom J Bell tolls.
There we go. And so you can look for us there, and we'll see you on Dynasty Compass.